Hi, welcome to the Secrets We Keep podcast. As you know, before we begin, I have some housekeeping. I want to remind you that this is a podcast, it's for reflection and conversation and awareness. I'm speaking from personal perspective and my lived observation. So, this is not therapy, counseling, diagnosis, or emergency support. If you are in immediate danger, you're afraid for your safety, or you feel like you may harm yourself or someone else, please contact emergency services, a crisis line, or a trusted local resource right away. Today's conversation may touch on emotional neglect, relationship pain, self worth, abandonment wounds, and accepting less than you deserve. Please listen with care, and if something feels heavy, pause, step away, or give yourself a moment if needed. And when you're ready, come back. Now, I was sitting here thinking about how many people are in relationships with people who say they love them, but they don't really show love through action, right? Not consistently. Maybe on birthdays or holidays, maybe once in a while they'll do something thoughtful, you know? But day to day, there's very little effort. And I'm speaking mostly from a woman's point of view right now, although I know men experience this too. But a lot of women are accepting the bare minimum. And when I say the bare minimum, I mean the absolute bare minimum. They may get a good morning text. How was your day text? Might be in the middle of the day or after he gets off work. And then maybe a good night text. Maybe a phone call before work, and then maybe another phone call after work, and then maybe one in between, or maybe one at night. But where's the effort? Where's the action? Where is the showing up for the relationship? Where's the consistency? Where is the desire to actually see the person that you claim to love? And I'm not talking about new relationships. I'm talking about relationships that have lasted greater than 5 years. Okay? Some of these people haven't even seen their partners face to face in months. Yep, I said months. And there's always a reason: work, being tired, no transportation, too busy, too stressed. Something happened. But both people work. And sometimes the woman is carrying far more responsibility than the man is. Now, hear me, I said sometimes the woman is carrying far more responsibility than the man. Because I don't want anybody saying, well, I got responsibilities too. I understand. And this is not an absolute, it's not about 100% of the people, but majority. So she may have children. She may have been caring for a disabled child. She may be helping aging parents. She may be working full time while emotionally holding everybody else together. Now, that's a lot of the times. A lot of women do that. Now, that's not a badge of honor. That is something that we as women need to work on because we really need to take care of ourselves. Now, I digress. So let me get back. Meanwhile, the man may only be responsible for himself. Yet, somehow, she's still expected to do most of the emotional labor in the relationship. And what confuses me is this: if somebody truly wants to see you, don't you usually find a way? I know, especially men. Men usually find a way to get to what they truly want, right? If he really wanted to spend time with her, wouldn't he make the effort? Even if transportation was difficult, even if it took longer, even if it wasn't convenient, because love is rarely convenient all the time. And when I talk about showing up and I said birthdays or holidays or things like that, yeah, I do mean showing up, but what about with gifts, right? And it doesn't have to be really expensive gifts. It doesn't have to be perfection. I'm not talking about somebody having endless money. This is not about financial stability. It's about the effort, the respect, the consistency, the thoughtfulness in it. Sometimes the gifts don't even feel thoughtful anymore, not because they're cheap, but because they feel disconnected, like an afterthought, like an obligation. You know, like he was just checking a box instead of loving his person, especially after years together. By then, you should know what your partner likes. You should know what makes them smile. You should know what matters to them. If you care enough to know, if you care enough to learn, if you've been paying attention throughout the years. But then I started thinking about the woman. Why did she accept it? Maybe she has spoken up over and over again. Maybe she's repeated the same conversation so many times she's emotionally exhausted. I did that in one relationship, and all it did was have us disagree. He became very defensive, and no one was listening. So nothing got done. And I accepted that and accepted that, and accepted that. And that's one of the reasons I wrote my book. That's one of the reasons I'm doing this podcast, because it was something in me that needed to be healed. It was a wound in me, right? For me to accept that. So it may not be for you, but I promise you it's for some female that you love, that you know, that you care about. So please share this podcast with them, because maybe she stopped asking because nothing changed, like I said, or she's just afraid to walk away. Maybe there's a wound there, a deeper wound, something tied to abandonment, rejection, loneliness, self worth. I don't know what all mine was tied to, probably all of them, you know, but I definitely know I had childhood trauma and I had deep wounds. And I didn't feel I deserved any better than what I was receiving. So, what makes someone stay in a relationship where they're surviving off that half hearted love? What makes somebody convince themselves that that's enough? Because these aren't people living together trying to survive financially. These are people in long term relationships who are still emotionally disconnected. So, again, so what keeps her there? Does she believe she deserves more? Or has she slowly convinced herself she doesn't? Or maybe the harder truth is that sometimes people only do what they're allowed to do, right? They only do what they know they can get away with. You know, it's like toddlers or even our teenagers, they try you, they test the boundaries. And if you allow them to get away with certain things, they'll keep doing those things. So sometimes the other person knows exactly what they're not giving. So that guy, he knows what he's doing. And so they continue because nothing changes. The relationship continues anyway. Was she gonna get mad for a little bit? Probably won't speak for a little bit. He can deal with that. That's the uncomfortable part of this conversation. Because eventually you have to ask yourself, if I keep having the same conversation over and over, why am I still here? At some point, maybe the answer is not another conversation. Maybe the answer is deciding whether you're willing to continue accepting less than what you know love should feel like. But then another thought crossed my mind. What if some people honestly don't know what love is supposed to feel like? I didn't know. I didn't have a blueprint. What if they never learned it? What if growing up, love was inconsistent? It was conditional, it was distant, it was silent, it was painful. And I can amen each and every one of those. What if nobody ever taught them that love was supposed to feel safe? That love was supposed to be balanced, reciprocated, and gentle? What if that they spent most of their lives learning how to survive relationships instead of learning how to be loved inside of them? I'm talking about the women, us. And maybe it didn't stop in childhood. Maybe she carried those same wounds into her teenage years, 20s, 30s, 40s, even 50s. Some people reach adulthood still not fully knowing what healthy love looks like. That was me. So they accept inconsistent love because inconsistency feels familiar. Me again. Remember, I told you I was speaking from my perspective. So this isn't a beat down. It isn't about every woman. It was my perspective. But I do know in speaking to people and in interviewing people for another book that I'm writing, man, it was like we were the same people, right? I don't know. So because they reached adulthood not really knowing what healthy love looks like, and because the inconsistency felt so familiar, they silenced themselves, they quiet their needs, and they become afraid to ask for more because deep down they fear being abandoned if they do ask for more. And that creates this internal frustration, this sadness, and sometimes even anger. And they're really mad at themselves because they're unhappy and they don't fully know how to verbalize what is missing. Or maybe they do know, but they're afraid to say it out loud, afraid they'll be, considered needy, afraid they will push their person away, afraid of losing even the little bit of love they think they have. And one of the saddest thoughts to me is this: I think some women truly believe having part of a man is better than having no man at all. I have heard women say that. I've had women tell me that. Even if that man is emotionally unavailable, even if he barely shows up, even if the relationship survives mostly on words instead of actions, that hurts me. It hurts my soul because somewhere along the way, some people learn to shrink their expectations instead of believing they deserve more. They did this not because they lacked the strength, not because they were foolish, but because sometimes people accept the kind of love that matches how worthy they secretly feel inside. Now, that's not the persona that they're portraying outside, that facade that you see. I love me some me, and they going around and we thinking everything's okay. You know how we say check on your strong friend? Check on your strong friend. I mean, really check on your strong friend. Not feeling worthy. That's a deep question. So it's not just why did she stay, but what taught her this was love in the first place? And again, here I go. It was another thought that crossed my mind. My mind was busy today. Sometimes I wonder if some people were healed wrong, you know, not healed completely, not healed safely, just healed enough to function, enough to smile, enough to work, just enough to survive, but not healed enough to believe they deserve consistency. They weren't healed enough to stop accepting love that hurts them. And maybe that's why some women ask for so little. Not because they truly want little, but because life has taught them not to expect much. Maybe somewhere along the way they learned don't ask for too much, don't be difficult, don't be needy, don't push people away. So they settle for almost love, almost effort, almost relationships. Another question that keeps coming to my mind is this: who broke her? Who convinced her that love was supposed to feel lonely? Who taught her she had to earn attention? Who taught her silence was safer than honesty? Because people are not born believing they deserve less. Something happened. Some wounds, some rejection, some abandonment, some disappointment, some repeated hurt. And eventually people start confusing survival with love. But I also believe this: your wounds may explain you, but they do not have to define you. You are not your wounds. And healing sometimes begins the moment you stop asking, how do I keep this relationship? And start asking, why am I fighting so hard to keep something that barely pours back into me. Because maybe this conversation is not only about relationships, maybe it is about healing. Maybe it is about self-worth. Maybe it's about finally asking yourself, what would I accept if I truly believed I deserve to be fully loved? Thank you so much for spending your time with me. I appreciate you. I pray this helps you, that you share this, that we work and stick together. One love. Protect your peace, speak your truth, and continue healing. Until next time.